Hello friends, my name is Ben, and I'm going to be talking about the Overwatch character Zarya. Just to give a little bit of background, I work at a website called PC Games N. We're a PC news, reviews, features, all that good stuff website. You can see a link in the description below. I got access to the beta through them as a staff writer, and I wrote a little bit on the website about it, which you can also see links to below. But in these videos, what I wanted to do was go a lot more in depth on individual characters, mechanics, maps, etc., and provide a mixture of instructional stuff where we'll talk about, oh, you should play this way on this map, or you should use this character in this way. I've had success with this, that sort of thing. And criticism, where we'll talk about how Blizzard could improve certain aspects of the game, buff characters, nerf characters, change them around in more significant ways. And today's video will be focused, as I said, on Zarya. So the reason that we're starting with Zarya is that I personally just think she's really cool. I really like the way she's designed, both in terms of a weapon. I think the particle cannon's very cool with the laser mode and the grenade mode. But I also really like her design as a character, being this kind of Russian bodybuilding woman. I thought it was quite different from other characters in different video games and that sort of thing. But beyond that, she also kind of plays every role in the game. She's a tank, 400 HP, that's very decent for the game. Half of it regenerates by itself, which means she doesn't actually need support characters as much as some of the other tanks do to keep her healthy, because, half of her health comes back naturally without having to pick up any health backs at all. She can also kind of play the support role in that she can give these shields to her allies, and so long as those allies aren't interested in taking damage, that they don't have anything that they gain from that, and currently in the game nobody gains anything from that except for a little bit of ultimate bar, they are interested in having that. So there's no awkward situations where the way that you heal isn't actually helpful to your allies. She can also be a damage dealer when those shields are used properly, because it ups the damage of her cannon. And when that's between kind of 75 and 100, it does really respectable damage, particularly the alternate fire grenade mode. And lastly, she's a really good combo machine, in that her ultimate, Graviton Surge, can bring all these characters together, and that's just powerful in the game. It works very well with a lot of ultimates, and it works even outside of that, particularly if you think about a character like Pharah, who has this automatic AoE weapon, same with Junkrat, for example. Having all your enemies in one place can be comboed with without them having to do anything other than hold left click. That's really powerful. So the first thing we'll talk about is Zarya's primary weapon, the particle cannon. It's got two fire modes. The first one is the short-range laser beam, which is pretty good for taking out squishies and that sort of thing, anyone who gets too close to you, and you might miss with the secondary fire, which is where she really gets her punch. These are lobbed grenades that have decent range. You can get them over front lines to hit healers behind, and they'll do a small amount of AoE damage as well, so if you fire them into stacked groups of enemies, you will manage to hit them all, and do really good team damage in that case. Now, the way that you power the gun up is with her shields, which are really the central component to how she's played well, and how to make sure you're getting the most out of the character. The way these shields work is that Zarya has one that she can put on herself and one that she can put on allies. They're on different cooldowns. What they do is, for about 3 seconds, any damage that character would take is instead absorbed by the shield. It also has a maximum amount of damage it can absorb before it breaks. The damage that it does absorb is used to power up the particle cannon, meaning that both the primary and the secondary fire will do more damage. Now, that 3 seconds that you have to absorb damage isn't very long at all, so what you can't do is you can't try and use it preemptively unless you're super coordinated or absolutely positive that a big chunk of damage is about to come in. What you definitely want to do is wait until yourself or an ally actually get into combat. Now, with yourself, this isn't really an issue, because you've got those 200 regenerating shields as part of your health bar that will take a little bit of the flak for you, so that you won't immediately be losing health that you can't get back, and you have enough time to react, press shift, and get one of these barriers up on yourself. As for your allies, your third-person perspective in them should make it a little easier to tell when they're going to take some damage, but basically they are going to be sacrificing a little bit of their HP, so that you can make sure you're absorbing as much damage as possible. Again, you're not going to be the only support on your side, so hopefully they can help keep those players up while you're attempting to help the team best as you can with this increased damage from your particle cannon. Now, the cooldowns on these abilities are fairly lengthy. They only start cooling down, which is around 10 seconds, after the shield is broken. So your uptime is about 3 seconds of every 15 that you can have this on somebody. So you do need to use them carefully within these big fights. However, so long as the first use is good, that's going to lead to kills. Now, once you've managed to get a couple of kills, your opponents don't have as many heroes where they are at the moment, so they will hopefully withdraw, giving you time to cool down. Then this cycle can start repeating, Or hopefully you will have taken out 2 of them, so now it's 6 versus 4, and you have the natural advantage anyway, and even if you lose a couple of guys, you've managed to use your shields effectively to win that part of the fight. Equally, what you don't want to do is be too afraid to use the shields to prevent just a little bit of damage and buff up the particle cannon. Say a tracer has blinked in at you and you know she's going to try and empty your clip and then get straight back out. It's fine to just protect against that. Not only will you maybe be able to kill her with your slightly more powerful particle cannon, but unless a push is either going out from your team or coming in from the enemy team at exactly that moment, there's no reason to worry about the wasted damage that you've got there. It's only going to be about another 10 seconds before you're ready to go again, and so long as the fight isn't immediately over, it should be useful anyway within whatever happens next. At the same time, you don't want to waste them. It can be very tempting to just hit the E button when it comes up on a friend when you've both just spawned, and then that's on cooldown, and if you run into the fight, you can't now protect them against the actual damage they're going to receive. It's not like Zenyatta, where putting the healing orb on someone, you can then just fire and forget. It has no effect whatsoever after the 3 seconds that it's on a friendly ally. So you want to make sure that you're not just completely wasting them, and that you are always absorbing some damage with each use, or protecting against any possible damage that could come in once you're a bit more advanced. Correct usage of both versions of the shield is going to give you a really good amount of damage, particularly on your secondary fire. It's going to make it very, very strong against stacked groups of enemies, particularly at taking out squishies. You can fire those grenades over your opponent's front line, hit their Mercies, hit their Lucios, and that sort of thing. And it's also going to protect your teammates with the primary fire. If people come in, you can just immediately lock them down and take them out. Now, of course, once you've got it all built up, what you're really thinking about doing is charging the Graviton Surge with this additional damage and using that to win big fights, take objectives, and eventually win the game. So we'll talk about that next. This is easily one of the best ults in the game as far as raw power is concerned, as well as how much flexibility it has. At its most basic level, what you want to be doing is capturing 3 or more enemies and then right-clicking on them until you get play the game. This will generally be enough to capture whatever point it is that you're going for, push the cart a little bit, win the game, whatever your current objective is. However, it's also kind of rare to happen. You need to have your particle cannon at a decent level of damage from having used shields, and your opponents also need to be clumped and maybe coming from one position due to the map layout. The easiest upgrade on this is to just have a little bit of coordination with your team. You want to throw your Graviton Surge and then make sure that they're all pumping AoEs and ultimates into there as well, and then you've done a MOBA. However, this doesn't take as much communication as you may initially be thinking. If a Hanzo, for example, lets his dragon loose, you can put the Graviton Surge into its path, and then anyone who's anywhere nearby will get hit by the full force of that dragon and probably die. Same is true as if a Junkrat, for example, fires off his roller mine, and you can hear it rolling behind you. You just Graviton Surge the nearest group of people. He's going to roll it into there if he's got any awareness whatsoever, blow it up, everyone gets a few kills, and you can push it on a little harder. But there are also strategic uses. It is an immobilization that lasts about 4 seconds. Say your opponents are trying to stop you capturing the last point of Anubis, and they're all running out of spawn because you wiped them out in your first push, but they're going to get to you before you can finish capping. If you just bung Graviton Surge at the entrance to that spawn, they're all going to be locked there for 4 seconds, which is more than enough time it can take to get the last third of a capture done, for example. Or say you're defending on a payload type map, and you just need to stop the opponent's touching an overtimed cart for as long as possible. You can use Graviton Surge just to drag one character away, and that's more than enough to make sure that you win the round. Obviously, now if there are groups of opponents coming at you, they're going to perhaps spread out before they reach where you want to Graviton Surge them. So you've got to think ahead and know that, okay, they're all going to be coming out of spawn in this clump. They aren't going to be able to get to the cart for the next 10 seconds anyway, so what I should do is Graviton Surge them now to delay them, so that even though they won't be in the Graviton Surge when the overtime runs out, they still won't be able to get there in time. What's important to remember about Graviton Surge is it's not perfect. Reaper, for example, can escape it with Shadow Walk, so if you capture him, it's not an instant kill. If you get a Lucio in there and he has his healing aura on, he's going to be able to keep some of the opponents that are in there as well with him up, and stop at least the damage from the Graviton Surge itself. The worst is perhaps Reinhardt, who of course can put his shield up even though he's in there, and then he can prevent all damage that you've got coming into it. You can counter that by having your team spread around it and do damage from multiple sides, but your best bet is to just be careful when you're placing it in the first place to try and not get these characters that can help counter it, and instead kill off 2 or 3 of their teammates, rather than maybe getting this 4 or 5 man Graviton Surge that doesn't kill anybody. Now I'm just going to go over some general tips for what you probably want to be thinking about when you're playing as Zarya. Now, she's good with basically everybody, as we discussed when we were talking about shielding. This extends to Graviton Surge and how anybody with an AoE can do very good work. However, against certain compositions she can struggle, especially if there's a lot of snipers due to her weakness at long range. Unless you're very good at predicting when they're going to shoot, your shielding is pretty ineffective against them, and obviously they can take you out as a tank because of your slow movement speed very easily with headshots. You can, however, be very effective against them by knowing exactly where their sightlines are and making sure you're shielded for that entire period, then getting up behind them and using the particle cannon's primary fire to get rid of them. However, you're nowhere near as good at this as perhaps a Tracer or a Reaper would be. I personally preferred being on the attacking side when it came to maps. This is because I find it a lot easier to use her shields when I know I'm running into enemy fire, rather than trying to predict when an opponent's going to come to me. However, having a large AoE ult plus a particle cannon secondary effect does mean that you can kind of do a lot of damage to attacking players who are coming in through small choke points. It's also important to remember that with maps, if there are large open spaces, you want to try and avoid those, but it's more to do with the composition of the enemy team, as we discussed, rather than the maps themselves. You can find enclosed spaces at pretty much every defense point on every map, where you can cover that area with the particle cannon, and allies who are more effective in open spaces can cover the wider open areas. One of the first things I noticed when I was playing Zarya is that I always had more HP than I thought I did. Having 400 HP isn't as big as some of the other tanks, but with half of it regenerating, you're always ready to get back into the fight. This can surprise opponents particularly. As always, with every character, it is important to know where the health packs are. However, it's not as vital on Zarya as it may be elsewhere. Another thing is that the shielding that she can give is very effective immediately, and her ult can be very quick to build if you're using them well. So she's always a good switch target if they're running out of time in the game and you think that you just need one big push to finish it. I have a couple of times switched from a support character, leaving my team healless, to play Zarya, who has these minor support roles, and then been able to win the game with a good Graviton Surge at exactly the right moment. Now I'm just going to talk quickly about what I think of her as an actual character within the game. For me, Zarya is the perfect Overwatch character. She's more than just a powerful ult with a lot of different abilities that scale with player skill, both in terms of aim when it comes to the grenades, and also decision making in when you're going to use the shield and when you're not. She's very strong, but has these obvious weaknesses when it comes to snipers that both they and you can play around in different ways. While I personally like that she's so flexible when it comes to different roles she can play, it's possible this applicability is a bit too broad. You may need to bring her down slightly so that she can be more powerful in other areas, but this is kind of difficult to judge when we're only about 4 days into the beta. She also doesn't have the raw power of someone like McCree or Soldier 76 when it comes to doing damage to opponents, but I think that might more be a problem with them being overpowered rather than Zarya herself needing moved up in that area. Overall, I always really enjoy when I get to play Zarya. It always feels like her particular skills are why the game occurred in the way it did, and that you couldn't replace it with any random tank to have a similar effect. She can also get a lot of kills, do a lot of damage, and save her teammates in clutch situations. Whenever we win with Zarya, I always feel like I was a big part of that, and particularly in the case of Graviton Surge, that you could attribute that win to me, and that's great for my massive ego. Jokes aside, I think that Blizzard should definitely look at Zarya as a good place for a character to be, try to make more characters like her, and also patch other characters so that they feel more unique in the same way that she does. Thanks very much for watching. This is hopefully the first of many videos. Let me know if you agree or disagree, either in the comments below, and like and subscribe and all that other stuff. Or you can contact me on Twitter, which is @ChaosSmurf, ChaosSmurf. Thanks for watching.